The fate of nations has always captivated humanity. Civilizations rise and fall, empires vanish into the sands of time. The question of how and why echoes through history. This question of destiny holds a special significance when considering Israel. Its existence is intertwined with ancient prophecies and contemporary conflicts. Understanding its future requires examining both religious texts and the realities of the present day. The Quran, as the holy book of Islam, offers profound insights into the course of history and the fate of nations. It speaks of the rise and fall of empires, the consequences of injustice, and the ultimate triumph of truth. Its verses provide a framework for understanding the past, navigating the present, and contemplating the future. While interpretations may vary, the Quran's teachings offer a valuable perspective on the complexities of the world. This exploration delves into the Quran's teachings to shed light on the future of Israel. It examines the relevant verses, explores their interpretations, and analyzes their potential implications. This examination considers the historical context of Israel, the current geopolitical landscape, and the ongoing conflict that continues to shape the region. By understanding the Quran's teachings, we can gain a deeper understanding of the forces at play. Through an objective and respectful analysis, this exploration aims to foster dialogue and understanding. It seeks to present the Quran's perspective on Israel's future, considering the various interpretations and their implications. The Quran, revealed to the Prophet Muhammad over 1400 years ago, is revered by Muslims as the literal word of God. It serves as a guide for life, offering moral and ethical teachings. The Quran addresses the nature of God, the purpose of life, and the relationship between humanity and the divine. It emphasizes justice, compassion, and accountability. The question of Israel's future holds immense significance in the 21st century. The region remains a focal point of geopolitical tensions, religious sensitivities, and humanitarian concerns. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine continues to generate headlines and spark debate worldwide. Understanding the Quran's perspective on this issue is crucial for fostering dialogue and seeking peaceful resolutions. The Quran's teachings on justice, compassion, and accountability provide a framework for addressing the complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It emphasizes the sanctity of human life, regardless of faith or ethnicity. The Quran calls for the peaceful resolution of conflicts. It encourages dialogue, understanding, and respect for the rights of all parties involved. The Quran's teachings on the fate of nations serve as a reminder that true peace and stability can only be achieved through justice and righteousness. It emphasizes that oppression, injustice, and the violation of human rights are ultimately unsustainable. The Quran calls for the establishment of a just and equitable society where the rights of all are protected. By examining the Quran's teachings in light of the current geopolitical landscape, we can gain valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities facing the region. The Quran's emphasis on dialogue, understanding, and respect provides a roadmap for navigating the complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. By embracing these principles, we can work towards a future where peace and justice prevail. Justice is a core theme in the Quran, with numerous verses highlighting its importance. Surah An-Nisa states, "O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony, then indeed Allah is ever acquainted." Surah Al-Ma'idah reiterates this principle: be just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is acquainted with what you do. Verses on prophecies and promises. The Quran contains prophecies and promises for the future of nations and peoples. Surah An-Nur, verse 55, promises security and succession to the righteous. But whoever disbelieves are the defiantly disobedient. Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 105, speaks of divine inheritance for the righteous. Ultimate inheritance of the earth belongs to the righteous. Surah Al-Qasas, verses 5 and 6, promises empowerment to the oppressed, establishing them in the land, showing Pharaoh and his minister their fears. Divine support often favors the oppressed. Surah Al-Hujurat, verse 13, offers a universal message of unity. The most noble in the sight of Allah is the most righteous. Allah is knowing and acquainted. Section 5, verses on peace and conflict resolution. The Quran emphasizes peace and reconciliation, advocating for conflict resolution through just means. Surah Al-Hujurat, verse 9, states, "And if two factions among the believers should fight, then make settlement between them. Indeed, Allah loves those who act justly." Surah An-Nisa, verse 90, promotes peace, except for those who take refuge with a people between yourselves and whom is a treaty. So if they offer you peace, then Allah has not made for you a cause for fighting against them. Surah Al-Anfal, verse 61, commands, "And if they incline to peace, then incline to it also and rely upon Allah." This encapsulates the Quranic directive to favor peaceful solutions and trust in divine wisdom. Section 1. Diverse perspectives on divine decree. The Quranic verses concerning the fate of nations and the concept of a divinely ordained term for each community have sparked diverse interpretations among Islamic scholars. Some scholars, adhering to a more literal understanding, emphasize the element of predestination. They posit that God has predetermined the rise and fall of civilizations, and human agency plays a limited role in altering this divine decree. This interpretation often highlights the importance of accepting God's will and recognizing the transient nature of worldly power. Other scholars, while acknowledging the ultimate sovereignty of God, adopt a more nuanced perspective, emphasizing the interplay between divine decree and human free will. They argue that while God has set certain principles governing the course of history, humans possess the capacity to make choices that influence their individual and collective destinies. This interpretation emphasizes the significance of striving for righteousness, upholding justice, and learning from the lessons of past civilizations. The concept of changing what is within themselves from Surah Al-Anfal, verse 53, is often cited to support this view, suggesting that societal transformation through moral and spiritual development can alter a nation's trajectory. This interpretation emphasizes the importance of individual and collective accountability, recognizing that societal decline is often a consequence of moral decay and deviation from divine guidance. These differing interpretations reflect the richness and complexity of Islamic thought, acknowledging the multifaceted nature of divine decree and human agency. While the ultimate outcome may rest with God, understanding the consequences of actions, striving for righteousness, and promoting justice remains central to the human experience. Section 2. Justice, Injustice, and the Cycle of Power. The Quran's emphasis on justice as a foundational principle for societal well-being has resonated deeply with scholars throughout Islamic history. They have consistently emphasized that the establishment and maintenance of justice are essential for the flourishing of any civilization. Conversely, injustice, oppression, and the transgression of human rights are seen as corrosive forces that inevitably lead to decline and eventual downfall. Scholars point to historical examples, both within and beyond the Quranic narrative, illustrating the cyclical nature of power dynamics. Empires and civilizations that prioritize justice, fairness, and the equitable distribution of resources tend to experience stability, prosperity, and longevity. In contrast, those characterized by tyranny, corruption, and the exploitation of the weak inevitably sow the seeds of their own destruction. The Quranic stories of past nations, such as the people of Ad, Thamud, and the Pharaoh, serve as cautionary tales, illustrating the consequences of unchecked power, arrogance, and the suppression of truth. These narratives emphasize that true power is not measured solely by material wealth or military might, but by adherence to moral principles and the pursuit of justice for all. This emphasis on justice has profound implications for understanding the Quran's perspective on the fate of nations, including Israel. It suggests that true peace and security cannot be achieved through domination or the violation of human rights. Rather, a just and lasting resolution requires recognizing the inherent dignity of all people and establishing a system that guarantees equal rights and opportunities for all. Section 3. The Children of Israel: Chosenness and Accountability. The Quran acknowledges the children of Israel's chosenness and their accountability to God. Chosenness is seen as divine favor with responsibilities. They must uphold God's laws and serve as a model of righteousness. Blessings include divine revelation, prophets, and a promised land. Straying from righteousness led to consequences. Divine favor is conditional on fulfilling responsibility. The message is about accountability, not animosity. All people are accountable to God and judged by their deeds. True piety lies in fulfilling responsibilities to God and humanity. Section 4. Interpreting prophecies, signs, timelines, and conditions. The Quranic verses containing prophecies and promises have been a subject of much discussion and interpretation among Islamic scholars. While some prophecies are explicit and directly related to specific historical events, others are more allegorical or open to interpretation regarding their timeline and fulfillment. This has led to a diversity of opinions regarding the signs of the end times, the sequence of events, and the conditions that might trigger their occurrence. Scholars caution against literal interpretations of prophecies, emphasizing the importance of understanding the context, symbolism, and broader message conveyed. They argue that focusing solely on the literal aspects can lead to misinterpretations, fear-mongering, and a distortion of the Quran's intended meaning. Instead, they advocate for a holistic approach that considers the ethical and spiritual dimensions of prophetic messages. The Quran itself warns against attempting to predict specific dates or timelines for the fulfillment of prophecies. The timing of such events remains solely within God's knowledge, and speculating on such matters is discouraged. Instead, the emphasis is placed on recognizing the signs, preparing spiritually, and striving to live righteously in anticipation of the inevitable. This approach encourages a focus on personal and societal reform rather than obsessing over apocalyptic scenarios. It emphasizes the importance of upholding justice, promoting peace, and living a life of virtue in the present, regardless of when or how these prophecies might unfold in the future. Despite the existence of verses describing past conflicts and divine retribution, the overarching message of the Quran emphasizes peace, reconciliation, and the avoidance of bloodshed. The Quran consistently encourages believers to seek peaceful resolutions to conflicts, prioritize dialogue over violence, and respond to aggression with restraint and a commitment to justice. This emphasis on peace stems from the recognition that all human life is sacred and that conflict often leads to suffering and destruction for all parties involved. The Quran acknowledges that there may be situations where fighting becomes unavoidable, such as self-defense against oppression or the protection of innocent lives. However, even in such cases, strict guidelines are provided to ensure that warfare is conducted justly, proportionately, and with the aim of restoring peace and order. The Quran condemns indiscriminate violence, targeting civilians, and the destruction of property, emphasizing the importance of upholding moral principles even in the midst of conflict. The Quran's emphasis on peace-building extends beyond mere cessation of hostilities. It calls for the establishment of just societies where the root causes of conflict, such as inequality, oppression, and the denial of basic human rights, are addressed. This requires a commitment to dialogue, mutual understanding, and a willingness to compromise and find solutions that benefit all parties. This message of peace and reconciliation holds particular significance when considering the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict. It challenges all sides to move beyond cycles of violence and retribution and to engage in a genuine and meaningful peace process based on justice, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to a future where both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace and security. The Quran's teachings on the fate of nations, justice, and the imperative of peace offer valuable insights for navigating the complexities of the current Israeli-Palestinian conflict. While interpretations may vary, the Quran's overarching message emphasizes the importance of seeking just and peaceful resolutions, recognizing the inherent dignity of all people, and avoiding actions that perpetuate cycles of violence and suffering. Scholars caution against using the Quran to justify or legitimize violence or to claim divine sanction for one side over the other. They emphasize that the Quran's message is one of universal justice, compassion, and accountability, applicable to all people regardless of their faith, ethnicity, or political affiliation. The Quran's teachings should inspire a commitment to peace-building, reconciliation, and the pursuit of a future where both Israelis and Palestinians can coexist peacefully and securely. The Quran's emphasis on dialogue, understanding, and respect provides a framework for addressing the root causes of the conflict and finding common ground. It encourages all sides to move beyond entrenched narratives, acknowledge the other's pain and suffering, and engage in a genuine and meaningful peace process based on mutual respect and a shared commitment to a future of peace and prosperity. Ultimately, the Quran reminds us that true peace is not merely the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. It is a state of being where all people are treated with dignity, their rights are respected, and their needs are met. Achieving such a peace requires a collective effort, a willingness to transcend divisions, and a commitment to building a future where justice, compassion, and human dignity prevail. The current state of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is marked by a fragile stalemate, punctuated by periodic escalations of violence and a deepening sense of despair among both populations. The two-state solution, once considered the most viable path to peace, faces significant challenges due to the expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, the lack of a unified Palestinian leadership, and the absence of meaningful negotiations. Israel, with its superior military strength and international support, maintains effective control over the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, restricting Palestinian freedom of movement, economic development, and political aspirations. The construction of the separation barrier, while presented by Israel as a security measure, has further fragmented Palestinian territories and restricted access to resources and opportunities. The Gaza Strip, governed by Hamas, faces a dire humanitarian crisis due to a crippling Israeli-Egyptian blockade imposed after Hamas seized control in 2007. The blockade, coupled with periodic military operations, has severely restricted the flow of goods and people, devastated the economy, and left the population of 2 million Palestinians in a state of perpetual crisis. Efforts to revive the peace process have stalled in recent years, with both sides blaming each other for the lack of progress. The international community, while expressing concern and calling for a return to negotiations, has been unable to exert sufficient pressure to break the deadlock. The absence of a credible political horizon and the lack of tangible improvements on the ground have fueled a sense of frustration, anger, and hopelessness among both Israelis and Palestinians. The ongoing conflict has had a devastating impact on the lives of ordinary Israelis and Palestinians, creating a pervasive climate of fear, insecurity, and suffering. For Palestinians, the occupation has resulted in restrictions on movement, limited access to resources, and a constant threat of violence and displacement. The expansion of Israeli settlements, often accompanied by the confiscation of Palestinian land and water resources, has further exacerbated tensions and fueled resentment. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is particularly acute, with the blockade creating dire shortages of essential goods, including food, medicine, and fuel. The healthcare system is on the verge of collapse, with hospitals struggling to cope with chronic shortages and a lack of essential medical equipment. The psychological toll of the conflict, particularly on children who have known nothing but war and blockade, is immeasurable. Israel also faces security threats from militant groups in Gaza and the West Bank, with rocket attacks, stabbings and other forms of violence claiming the lives of both Israeli civilians and soldiers. The constant state of alert and fear of attack has taken a toll on Israeli society, creating divisions and undermining the sense of normalcy and security. The international community has repeatedly called for an end to the violence and a return to negotiations. But efforts to address the humanitarian crisis have been insufficient. The ongoing occupation, the blockade of Gaza, and the absence of a just and lasting peace continue to fuel a cycle of violence and suffering that affects all parties involved. Viewing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through the lens of the Quranic teachings reveals a framework for understanding the situation and pursuing a path towards a just and lasting peace. The Quran's emphasis on justice, compassion, and the sanctity of human life transcends political ideologies, offering a universal message of peace. The Quran's condemnation of oppression and injustice resonates deeply with the plight of both Palestinians and Israelis. The pursuit of peace necessitates acknowledging past wrongs, addressing present injustices, and striving for a future where the rights and dignity of all are respected. It encourages both sides to engage in meaningful negotiations, listen to each other's narratives, and seek common ground. The historical backdrop. A sacred land, a contested history. To grasp the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and its Quranic ties, delve into the region's intricate history. For millennia, the land has been a crossroads of civilizations, empires, and faiths. The Quran calls it Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa, the Holy Land, a title shared by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Prophets like Abraham, Moses, David, and Jesus walked this land, leaving a legacy of faith. This shared heritage contributes to the competing claims and sensitivities. The land saw the rise and fall of empires, each adding to its rich tapestry. This history shaped the demographics and social fabric, creating a complex mosaic of identities. The Jewish people maintained a spiritual connection to the land, deeply rooted in their texts. This connection evolved into a political movement in the 19th century. Understanding this backdrop is crucial for comprehending the Quran's commentary on the children of Israel. It highlights the complexities of a shared history and the challenges of reconciling competing claims. Prophecies and geopolitics intertwine narratives. The Quranic verses concerning the children of Israel have diverse interpretations, often intertwined with contemporary geopolitics. Some interpretations have been used to justify conflict and foster animosity. It is essential to approach these interpretations with caution, recognizing the Quran's message of justice and peace. The Quran emphasizes that divine favor is conditional upon adherence to God's laws. Quranic narratives serve as cautionary tales, highlighting the consequences of straying from righteousness. True power lies in upholding justice, compassion, and dignity for all. The rise of Zionism and Palestinian dispossession, a clash of aspirations. Zionism emerged in the late 19th century, advocating for a Jewish state in Palestine. Jewish immigration, facilitated by the British Mandate, created tensions with Palestinians. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War led to Israel's victory and the displacement of Palestinians. The Nakba created a refugee crisis, with millions of Palestinians longing to return. Internationally condemned settlements further entrenched the occupation and fueled resentment. Justice and compassion require acknowledging all suffering and working towards a solution. Section 4. Modern conflicts and shifting sands, the search for peace amidst turmoil. The latter half of the 20th century witnessed wars and uprisings shaping the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The 1967 Six-Day War altered the balance of power, solidifying Israel's control over Palestinian territories. Israeli settlements and military checkpoints restricted Palestinian freedom and economic development. The First Intifada in 1987 highlighted the plight of Palestinians and fueled a global movement for self-determination. The Oslo Accords in the 1990s offered hope with the creation of the Palestinian Authority and a two-state solution. Rabin's assassination, settlement expansion, and the Second Intifada shattered the peace process. The 2005 Gaza withdrawal and Hamas takeover led to a blockade, worsening the humanitarian crisis. Failed negotiations and expanding settlements have led to deadlock and despair, making peace seem distant. Understanding these events is essential for comprehending the complexities and challenges of achieving peace. Section 5: Contemporary Perspectives, Islamic Voices on Justice and Resolution. In the contemporary Muslim world, diverse perspectives on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict reflect the multifaceted nature of Islamic thought. A growing chorus of Islamic scholars, intellectuals and activists advocate for peaceful solutions, social justice and interfaith dialogue. The Quran's message is one of universal justice, compassion and the sanctity of human life. They reject the notion of a religious war, highlighting shared values and aspirations for peace. Islamic scholars and activists point to Quranic principles of justice, reconciliation, and the avoidance of bloodshed. They advocate for a just and lasting peace based on international law and mutual recognition. Many Muslim-majority countries support the Palestinian cause, providing humanitarian aid and advocating for their rights. These efforts reflect the broader Islamic emphasis on social justice and standing up against injustice. Understanding these perspectives is crucial for fostering dialogue and challenging Islamophobic narratives. The Quran's message of peace, justice and compassion inspires a more just and peaceful world. Bridging the divide towards a shared future. Navigating the Israeli-Palestinian conflict requires addressing historical grievances and political realities. The Quran promotes justice and reconciliation. It encourages moving beyond entrenched narratives and engaging in a genuine peace process, establishing a viable Palestinian state alongside Israel. The Quran's message of compassion and forgiveness calls for healing and building a peaceful future. As we conclude this exploration into the Quran's pronouncements on nations, particularly its pronouncements on Israel, it is essential to synthesize the multifaceted tapestry woven throughout its verses. The Quran offers a comprehensive framework for understanding the rise and fall of civilizations, the interplay of human agency and divine decree, and the imperative of pursuing justice and peace. The Quran's historical narratives underscore a fundamental truth. The fate of nations is linked to their adherence to moral principles. Divine favor is earned through righteousness, justice, and the fulfillment of one's responsibilities to God and humanity. One of the most enduring theological debates revolves around the interplay of human free will and divine predestination. The Quran, while affirming God's ultimate sovereignty and knowledge of all things, also emphasizes the significance of human agency and the consequences of our choices. This delicate balance between divine decree and human responsibility permeates the Quran's teachings, urging us to strive for righteousness while acknowledging the limits of our control. The Quranic concept of qadr, often translated as divine decree or predestination, does not negate the importance of human action or absolve us from the consequences of our choices. Instead, it underscores the reality that God's knowledge encompasses all things past, present, and future, and that our lives unfold within the framework of His divine plan. This understanding should not lead to fatalism or a sense of resignation in the face of injustice or oppression. On the contrary, it should inspire us to strive for righteousness, knowing that our actions, while ultimately subject to God's will, have the power to shape our individual and collective destinies. The Quran reminds us that we are accountable for our deeds, and our choices have both worldly and eternal consequences. The Quranic verses concerning the fate of nations, including those pertaining to the children of Israel, should be understood within this framework of divine decree and human agency. While God may test nations and individuals with trials and tribulations, their ultimate fate is not predetermined but contingent upon their response to those challenges. The Quran emphasizes that God does not change a people's condition until they change what is within themselves, highlighting the transformative power of repentance, moral reform, and a return to righteousness. Reflecting on the Quran's teachings, a message of hope emerges amidst the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and broader challenges. The Quran offers a vision of a world transformed by justice, compassion, and peace. It emphasizes dialogue, understanding, and respect to break the cycle of violence and mistrust, encouraging all sides to acknowledge each other's pain and engage in a genuine peace process. The principle of forgiveness offers a path towards healing and reconciliation, letting go of anger and resentment to build bridges of understanding. The Quran's message extends beyond conflict, addressing broader challenges like poverty and inequality. It calls us to recognize our shared humanity and work towards a just, equitable, and peaceful world.